What is free will? And do we even have it? What do you think? I get asked this question quite a lot, actually, and it's because free will is the subject of tremendous debate. Nobody has achieved a consensus on whether or not we have free will because it's something that cannot be proven or measured scientifically or otherwise. Free will is this subjective paradox of existence because as soon as we try to grasp onto the nature of free will, it raises the question that free will might just be an elaborate illusion of consciousness. There is this notion of the choiceless choice, which merits that the mind can't actually conceptualize any choice without a prerequisite, without there being some underlying program which guides it to create that particular choice. This leads to the common narrative that a lot of scientists promote, which is that there is no free will whatsoever. But that pushes us into a tricky domain, which implies that human beings are simply machine-like organisms, playing out programmed scripts that consciousness writes and we as human beings simply fulfill. Which goes to show that our thoughts, our behaviors, our actions are simply trajectories of conscious awareness, which isn't created by us. It's in some way an energetic continuation of prior thought patterns, prior conditions and programs that were embedded in our minds from our ancestors, our parents, society, and different egregores within the matrix. However, I personally find this scientific notion that there is no free will to be fundamentally flawed in many ways. The alternative viewpoint is such that actually everything in reality is an expression of free will, because free will and consciousness are irrevocably connected. There can be no conscious experience without free will, because free will is an animation of consciousness which resides in every single conscious organism, which we can say leads to a higher perspective on the nature of experience itself. Let's just assume that no one and nothing has free will. That would mean then that everything within the simulation of reality is simply governed by a pre-written agenda. Everything has a definite beginning and end, and if everything's predetermined, then what's unfolding is simply a matter of time, a matter of the same predicted program running itself to completion. Now, what's really the point of that? From the perspective that consciousness is exploring itself by animating different possibilities in the present experience, it would seem that choice is actually the reason for consciousness to exist. Free will is the ability that all conscious sentient beings have to choose deliberately, which opens up different energetic pathways, leading consciousness to explore the nature of choice and the origin of selection, which comes from our ability to choose differently. I find it interesting to explore why it is that free will is so triggering for so many people. And I feel the deeper issue is that most people can't really accept the fact that they have free will, because what comes along with that is needing to accept that they actually have the ability to choose differently in some scenarios in which their free will was not actually readily available to them. For example, feeling like you're a victim of circumstance might seem to be a more convenient solution than assuming that you have a choice to rise above the status of perceived victimhood and choose differently. Choosing to liberate yourself in the reality in which you have free will makes you counteract any lesser, lower dimensional variables that keep you stuck in whatever notion you feel is actually leading to this victimhood. Because of this, if you look at any form of suffering you're creating in your reality, you will actually start to see that there is a choice you are creating to maintain that suffering. It's a stance that you are choosing either consciously or subconsciously to validate the notions that were instilled in your mind before you even realized you had free will in the creation of your state of consciousness. In other words, to assume that you don't have free will means you have no right to change the trajectory that your conscious awareness is taking. It's a kind of sentiment that you experience of powerlessness and perceived helplessness, in which you don't think anything can be done about the nature of your experience. In this position, the only thing you can do is react to the past in such a way that you are locked into this linear timeline. And as I often talk about, this is a reality which is reductionistic in nature. It implies that everything is deterministically created by the ego to simply lead to these loopholes, karmic cycles, and lessons which have no seeming outcome. On the other hand, if we consider that everything is created with the intention of achieving resolution, expansion, liberation, and the evolution of consciousness, then every perceived limitation and scenario which guided you into a position of victim consciousness is actually meant to teach you how to authorize your free will to choose differently. Your free will can be seen as a bridge between the subconscious and the conscious minds, which allows you to execute a new strategy to change your own identity and your reality completely. Now, of course, this seems to be sometimes out of bounds, because you would think that if your subconscious mind is creating at least 95% of your reality, then there simply is nothing you can do about your reality at hand. The majority of your world is scripted by a part of you that is unbeknownst to you creating all the things that you're experiencing, which means you're somewhat of a victim in your own inner realm. If you don't know these things about your shadow and about the creation of your underlying thought patterns and beliefs, then you seem to have no control over the things you're experiencing. However, let's lean into the minority aspect. What about the 5% of your consciousness which has the power to override the scripts, the conditions, the programs, the limitations, and everything else that you think is actually hijacking your ability to experience a different reality? This is where free will can really be found. There are a few constraints when it comes to tapping into your free will, and one of them is that we aren't really taught that free will is an option to us. Clearly, with the majority of the scientific perspectives leaning towards the lack of free will, what we're taught is that we live in a reality governed by the mind and linear thought patterns, meaning that we see ourselves existing on this timeline in which nothing was actually created by our own will. What we're brought up to believe is that we are simply constituents of the past and organized thought patterns that came before us. So everything that you were taught created your current intentions, your current mentality, your current belief systems, and principles which rule your life. Because of all these learned behaviors, you now exist in a paradigm of your past and a reality that wasn't really created by you, meaning that your present scenario is mostly not a personal experience. It's an experience shaped by other people and other factors, which are really external in nature. Because of this, if your consciousness is attached to every factor which was actually externalized in nature and part of a learned feedback response, then what you're currently considering to be your free will is simply something that is due to those past scenarios replaying in your conscious mind. Of course, this isn't really free will. And if we're to see free will as the thing that creates the continued patterns bridging our past and future states, then of course we don't have it. This is not the true nature of free will. This is the conditioned response, which is indeed an illusion of free will that keeps reinforcing our perceived position of victimhood. I strongly believe that everybody who does not believe in free will is actually hiding something from themselves. They're choosing not to see that there is an ability to access potentiality outside of the physical template, in the energetic realm in which all possibilities are existent, and actually the things that you may not want to believe were created by free will were most definitely created from that higher place of free will. So let's take this a step higher. There are certain things that you definitely in this lifetime did not consciously create. For example, when you were a child, you were born into certain circumstances, a family that you did not consciously choose, on a day that you did not consciously create, with relatives and in a place and a time, which of course was not of your conscious choosing. Or was it? What if we conceptualize these underlying factors of our reality that created the foundation or the baseline for our human experience to be actually the prerequisite that drives our free will? What if these were the factors that our higher self very carefully created so that we would have the ideal template to learn how to enact our free will through our physical experience? This takes free will to a whole other level. Everything that you currently believe exists outside of the realm of free will is likely connected to some of these variables that you of course did not consciously create. Things that were formed in your early childhood, things that might have happened to you that you had no power over, or situations that played out when somebody older than you or in a position of authority commanded over you. However, from the perspective of the higher dimensional self, everything that exists in an interesting relationship with us, meaning it has some control over us because it's guiding us to not create that experience but to react to it more consciously, is actually leading to the deepest lesson of all, which is how we choose to internalize those scenarios that we did not consciously create to learn to be a more conscious creator in our reality. Let's break this down. If you did not consciously create a scenario, for example, a very difficult or painful event in your life, something that you believe you couldn't possibly have invested your energy into, or something that happened early in your childhood, potentially a traumatic event, or something that you felt you could not have possibly chosen. What that's now allowing you to experience is yourself relative to the energetic effect that that event has on you. Meaning your consciousness is now playing out a certain energetic pathway, which is a feedback loop created by the past scenario and your involvement in it. If you end up living out that energetic pathway and feeling like you have no control over how that past event made you feel, then you will lack free will. And that notion that you have no free will continuously be proven, kind of like a nocebo effect, which keeps playing itself out in your subconscious mind. If you believe that your past has complete and absolute control over you, this absolutely will be the case. 100% guaranteed. If you, however, come to accept that your past is simply laying out a storyline for you to experience the contrast of further evolution, growth, learning, and personal development, then you'll come to see that your past is not at all holding you back from experiencing future development. And free will immediately comes into play. Free will is the ability to see outside of the ramifications of time and space, looking beyond the box of the mind and beyond any constructs which were ever instilled in your field, which goes even above and beyond generational programs, genetic predispositions, and anything else that might have infiltrated your field that you feel you have no control over. And right now, I want you to really think about what currently exists in your field which you feel you have no ability to control. This feeling of lacking control leads to some of the deepest wounding that we create within our own spirit. It's wounding that creates a sense of disconnect between our different bodies of consciousness, holding us back from our own potentiality, our own growth, and our true purpose. Whatever you feel you cannot control is something you have not learned to see the deeper lesson in, and understand that those feelings keeping you helpless and powerless and victimized are actually you blocking yourself from experiencing the deepest place of self-empowerment. It's quite a paradox. Now create a little bit of distance in between these things that you feel you have no control over that especially elicit a negative response in your now moment, and you. What exists in between that experience, which is at this point just an episodic memory that your consciousness can lean into to experience those same feelings over and over again, is a choice. In that in-between, you have the ability to choose your perception, which is a new kind of response that can potentially override the negative feedback created by your entire past and all conditions that came before this current moment. What you're now able to experience is the duality of either fear and lower self-worth or love. This is the simple choice, which those who don't believe in free will may not necessarily come to see as the pure truth of our experience. If you're not able to see that you have the ability to choose to side with either fear or the darker aspect of this polarity spectrum which keeps you bound to whatever has been your reality in the past, and love, or the higher evolution where you come to see that your higher self carefully created this experience to teach you how to more lovingly embrace yourself and the opportunity this moment is presenting you, then you will be trapped, because this choice is what leads to continual evolution. If we don't believe in free will, then how can we actually evolve? And how can consciousness evolve if not for our own free will? From a higher perspective, consciousness is not only the creator, it's also the creation. And we as a lone vessel of consciousness are entangled with every other aspect of our conscious experience. So the way we experience reality is not just like a vehicle observing reality on a screen before our eyes. We're actually energetically invested in every single thing that ends up being created in our reality. And this brings a simulation to life. We're not experiencing some video game reality in which we're just this robot playing out scenarios that were scripted for us, because what reason would that really serve? Why would the universe go through this elaborate process of creating life to intelligently imbue consciousness and divinity into all sources of the living experience, if all of it was simply to play out some kind of script that consciousness already knew would lead to some definite outcomes? The notion that there is no free will quite literally erases the divinity from experience. It leads to a view that is monotone and lacking vital energy, because energetically, we must be invested to experience our own will, our soul's contract, to come into a higher state of consciousness because of this experience, and not to be left feeling stuck here due to this illusory notion that we don't have will or the ability to freely navigate this experience. At times, it may be difficult to see that we have free will in any given situation. But remember, the free will doesn't just come down to what you choose to do with your reality or the world at large. It comes down to how you choose to experience and internalize the subtlety of the experience. If you're perceiving reality simply through the mental lens, everything will appear to be a reflection of a fixed realm of forms that you're just observing and have no power to interact with consciously. However, this is a reality in which you're seeing the world like the shadows in Plato's allegory of the cave. It's a reality in which you're just seeing reflections of different figures, the creation of consciousness without realizing you are the creator of this experience for yourself. And through your choice to energetically entangle with reality in a particular way, the simulation actually changes in real time. This means you're choosing not to perceive your third-dimensional self as some limited avatar, just seeing the shadow of your higher dimensional capabilities, but you actually bring that shadow to life by engaging yourself in a higher dimensional way. This means you choose to see in every situation you have a fundamental choice, and that comes down to your awareness. Your free will lives in your ability to choose lovingly, to see and think outside of the box, and to feel in a transient way that allows you to embody any perspective outside of you, which means you're never stuck to any fixed theory, limitation, or belief system. Everything is seen on a transient spectrum, because that ultimately is the agenda that consciousness is here to experience. Flexibility, fluidity, and love through integration of all other perspectives within this beautiful reality that unfolds itself only to those who believe they actually have free will in this experience. So if you ever feel bogged down by life or feel that you have no free will, stop yourself and question, why is it that you feel you need to reinforce that perspective? Because ironically, you're actually using your free will to keep yourself in a cage of limitation unless you choose to embody the higher perspective, in which case free will actually confirm itself to you through an ever-unfolding experience of bliss and new opportunity that will continuously let consciousness evolve through your own awareness.